Hey, I wanted to offer this if it's helpful to anyone. This was something that came to my mind when we were reading about subsidiary focal integration. And I thought maybe, I know we had some discussions in our small groups that we were all a little bit trying to figure out what that meant and why it mattered. And so I thought that I would offer this if it's helpful to anybody, there's a great example of subsidiary focal integration in the Harry Potter book, the first Harry Potter book. I'm going to read it. If you don't want to listen to me reading a couple pages of it, you can skip ahead to maybe 3 minutes or so. Or if you do want to hear it, here it goes. This is from page 206 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Harry has been running away from his professors and he stumbles into a room with a magical mirror in it. And it says this: "It was a magnificent mirror, as high as the ceiling, with an ornate gold frame, standing on 2 clawed feet. There was an inscription carved around the top," which I won't read because it's a bunch of nonsense words, and I don't know how to say them. His panic fading, now that there was no sound of Filch or Snape, Harry moved nearer to the mirror. Wanting to look at himself, he stepped in front of it. He had to clap his hands in front of his mouth to stop himself from screaming. He whirled around. His heart was pounding far more furiously than when the book had screamed, for he had not seen only himself in the mirror, but a whole crowd of people standing right behind him. But the room was empty. Breathing very fast, he turned back to the mirror. There he was, reflected in it, white and scared looking, and there, reflected behind him, were at least 10 others. Harry looked over his shoulder, but still no one was there. Or were they all invisible too? Was he in fact in a room full of invisible people, and this mirror's trick was that it reflected them, invisible or not? He looked in the mirror again. A woman standing right behind him was smiling and waving. He reached out his hand and felt the air behind him. If she was really there, he'd touch her. Their reflections were so close together, but he felt only air. She and the others existed only in the mirror. She was a very pretty woman. She had dark red hair, and her eyes are just like mine, Harry thought, edging a little closer to the glass. Bright green, exactly the same shape. But then he noticed that she was crying, smiling, but crying at the same time. The tall, thin, black-haired man standing next to her put his arm around her. He wore glasses, and his hair was very untidy. It stuck up at the back, just as Harry's did. Harry was so close to the mirror now, his nose was nearly touching that of his reflection. "Mom?" he whispered. "Dad?" They just looked at him, smiling, and slowly Harry looked into the faces of the other people in the mirror and saw other pairs of green eyes like his, other noses like his, even a little old man who looked as though he had had Harry's knobbly knees. Harry was looking at his family for the first time in his life. The Potters smiled and waved at Harry, and he stared hungrily back at him. His hands pressed flat against the glass as though he was hoping to fall right through it and reach them. He had a powerful kind of ache inside him, half joy and half terrible sadness. How long he stood there, he didn't know. The reflections did not fade, and he looked and looked until a distant noise brought him back to his senses. He couldn't stay here. He had to find his way back to bed. He tore his eyes away from his mother's face and whispered, "I'll come back," and hurried from the room. Now, I thought that was really a beautiful picture of SFI, because when Harry first goes in the room, his focus is on the mirror, right? So he sees all the details of the mirror, that it's ornate, that it's beautifully carved, that it's got this inscription on the top. And then he looks in the mirror, and the mirror becomes his subsidiary, meaning that he looks through the mirror. He's no longer paying attention to the details and the ornate carving of the mirror. Now he's looking through it, and he sees a reflection. And he starts to try and figure out, well, how does this reflection work? What does this mean? Are they here? Are they not here? Are they real? Are they fake? Are they invisible? He starts to try to understand the reflection, and the mirror has become subsidiary. And then he realizes what the reflection is, that it's his family. And when he recognizes it's his family, all of a sudden the idea of a reflection becomes subsidiary as well. So not only is the mirror subsidiary, but the reflection is subsidiary. And I love the imagery that his nose is so close to the glass that as if he's hoping to fall right through and reach them, right? That he's gotten so close to the mirror that he no longer even recognizes that there's a reflection, because he's so focused on who's in the reflection, his family. And so now the reflection and the mirror have become subsidiary, and his focus is solely on his family. And I noticed that when he leaves, it doesn't say Harry turned away from the mirror. It says Harry turned away from his mother's face, right? That his focus is so on who is in the reflection that he's forgotten that it's even a reflection, or even that there's a mirror present. His mother's face is what he sees. And later on in the chapter, he brings his friend Ron to see the mirror, and Ron is not under such illusions. Ron is like, well, maybe this shows you whatever you want to see. Right? Ron is not nearly as impressed, it even says, with the mirror as Harry is. And Ron sees the mirror and he knows that it's a mirror, and he's like, well, it's just a mirror. Maybe it shows us whatever we want to see. I don't know. Ron never loses focus on the fact that this is just a mirror. And we could even see that maybe Ron's subsidiaries have something to do with that, right? Ron isn't missing his family. Ron isn't suffering a major loss like that. And so to Ron, the mirror isn't that significant. It's just showing him something interesting. So that's the function of it. But I think what even is better about this is at the end of the chapter, Dumbledore catches Harry looking at this mirror, and he says something that I think is really, really helpful into understanding the application of this idea of subsidiary focal integration. Harry asks him what the mirror does, and he asks if it shows us whatever we want. And Dumbledore says, well, yes and no, Dumbledore said quietly. It shows us nothing more or less than the deepest, most desperate desire of our hearts. You, who have never known your family, see them standing around you. Ronald Weasley, who has always been overshadowed by his brothers, sees himself standing alone, the best of all of them. However, this mirror will give neither knowledge nor truth. Men have wasted away before it, entranced by what they have seen, or been driven mad, not knowing if what it shows is real or even possible. Now, I don't think our focuses are always so dire, but I think the point that Dumbledore makes there is really helpful all the same for why this is applicable, that sometimes when we're so focused on something to the detriment or the lack of recognition of our subsidiaries, we can waste away before that, which isn't going to give us any knowledge or any more clarity, right? That we can become so focused on what we're seeing. As Harry gets so focused on the fact that he sees his family, and that's beautiful, right? He's never met his family. He's never seen them before. So this beautiful moment where he gets to spend with his family, but the temptation to lose focus that this isn't real. They've passed away. And if you forget that this is a mirror or that this is just a reflection, you're going to waste away before this thing that isn't going to help you better know your family, really. And so the beauty of what Dumbledore says is there, and what is practical for us or to people that we're counseling or whatever, is that we can waste away before our focus if we don't become aware of our subsidiaries. If we forget that there's a mirror that we're looking through, or if we forget the truth to inform our perspective. And again, that's not to say that every time we have a focus that it's that dire, but I think that's the value of exploring our subsidiaries, is it keeps us from wasting away, staring so closely at a focus that we're not able to see the bigger picture, and we're not able to see the mirror that we're looking through. So hopefully that's helpful. If it's not, someone who's in charge and knows whether or not this is right or wrong can feel free to tell me, and I'll take it down right away. But I just wanted to share that. I don't know if it's of any value to anybody, but it was helpful for me in thinking through that idea. So thanks all. You rock.